Welcome to the CFO Track podcast. I'm your host, Tom Hunter, and every week I'll be bringing you stories from some of Australia's best and brightest CFOs and the lessons they learnt along the way. My goal for the podcast is to provide learning and development opportunities for those wanting to get to the level of the guests on this show, but they just didn't have the access to those lessons otherwise. Let's get into it. This week I'm joined by Auden, the CFO of University of New England. Karma's on a quest to turn accountants into financial storytellers and gives fantastic insight to finance in the university sector and how that structure changes her approach to business partnering. For managing stakeholders and working with the broader business, this is one you don't want to miss. So here we go. Karma Auden, welcome to the CFO Track podcast.
Hey Tom, how you doing? Friday the 13th today.
Well, hopefully it goes to plan. You never know on the 13th. How's the week been?
It's been busy, but it's been good.
Yeah.
And it's finishing with a Friday afternoon chat with Tom. So that's got to be a great end to the week, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a nice sunset you've got there in the background. I imagine that's not live.
No, that is not live. I actually took that with my ancient Android phone on my first day when I joined the university up here. So that was back in June 2024. Nice. And it reminds me that one day in winter, I managed to leave work before the sun went down. I think that was day one, and I'm not sure that it happened again in winter. But anyway.
Fair enough. Well, it's a good segue because I've given the listeners a bit of an intro to you, but I can never do it justice. So it'd be good to hear it from yourself, where you're at the minute, what you're working on.
Okay. I am the Chief Financial Officer at the University of New England in Armidale, New South Wales.
Yep.
We are probably in the heart of the fuel crisis up here at the moment. It's an interesting place to be. I've really enjoyed working in the university sector, but I enjoy the rural lifestyle. And so this is a great mix of both. It's just, I think I landed in the right place at the right time.
Yeah, nice. So we'll get back to the start again. So because the whole idea behind the podcast is to give up and coming finance professionals a bit more insight to the journey and what got them to the level that you are. So what was it particularly about finance? What was it particularly about accounting that drew you to the industry?
So this is a funny story. I was never going to be an accountant, and I was actually sharing this story last night. I was at a college dinner, and I was sat next to one of our professors who works in chemistry, and I said, funny story, I was going to be a pharmacist. And that didn't happen. So the reason that didn't happen was I couldn't do the double degree that I wanted to do. Right. And so I started looking elsewhere, and I kind of figured, well, if I'm good with numbers and I'm not kind of sure where I want to go, a business degree, particularly with a focus on accounting, enables you to go into any industry. So I kind of figured that was a good basis, and why not start there and see where it goes.
Yeah, right. So you're in the realised to do accounting like just pre-university selection and all that kind of thing?
I never did any. All of my Year 12 subjects were science and languages, so I was kind of setting myself up with a broad base so I could do anything. Then when I decided to sign up for a commerce degree, so accounting degree, I was living in Victoria at that stage, so I was living in Melbourne, and this is back before it was PwC, and it was Coopers and Lybrand. And they were running a short kind of 3-day introductory course to accounting for those who were going to uni but had not done any accounting classes. And so I went up into the big smoke of Melbourne, and I did that for 3 days, and I actually really enjoyed it. So I think that set me up. Just having that 3-day kind of intensive introduction probably set me up for the first year.
Yeah, right. What was it specifically about the intro that drew you to it?
I think for me, I've always liked numbers, and I've always been a person who, and I often tell everybody not to do this, don't get so caught up in reconciling everything to the second decimal place kind of thing. But part of me does I don't know if you probably too young, Tom, but there is an old H&R Block ad where the lady at the end of it balances her submission or whatever, and she does this like fist pump. And that's kind of the feeling I get when you get to an end of a reconciliation and everything balances. It's a bit, if I go back, it's probably a bit like when you're working in chemistry and you actually get a formula that works.
Yeah.
I think for me it was that kind of satisfaction.
Yeah.
And so you get that in accounting as well.
Yeah. No, it's a good reason as any.
Yeah, why not?
Yeah. And so what was your first accounting role like?
So my first accounting role was probably more of a generalist role. So I did one year at university full time, and then I went correspondence.
Yeah.
So
Right.
I essentially gave myself my own work. Everybody talks now about work integrated learning and the importance of application.
Yeah.
I basically started working full time after my first year of uni.
Yeah.
And I was working as a business manager for a small management consultancy.
Right.
So I kind of did everything. So I wasn't just doing the books.
Yeah.
I was also preparing materials, and I was coordinating logistics.
And you're still at uni. That must have been. How was that? How are you feeling?
I didn't think about it at the time because it was a small business. So I was a business manager, but I was working in an office that was part of it was basically a converted garage it was a big 2-story house, and they'd converted the garage into a full office suite. Yeah. And so I was working in a house. It's not like I was a business manager of a Fortune 500 company or anything. Like it was. And this is where titles, I think, can be deceiving. But for me, it was a really good start, particularly that the lady I worked for at the time used to say I was like the hub. So I was the center who kept everything going in the office while all the consultants were out delivering their courses and doing other things. And she knew that she could always rely on me to get stuff done back at home base. So I think that was my first, I'm going to call it accounting role, but I think it's almost more than that, because it was an introduction to business. Yeah. So it wasn't just the numbers, but what the numbers are representing, which is what I always talk about.
Yeah, cool. And that specifically in terms of getting an understanding of the business and operations and all the rest of it, rather than just pure accounting. How do you think that set you up then for the next few roles and just to, I guess, catalyst that?
I think that's the premise of what I am, Tom, because I keep, and we'll probably get to this later on, but I keep saying I'm on a quest to turn accountants into storytellers.
Yeah.
And I think for me that started from the outset because I was working in a business. I never worked in public practice. Yeah. And a lot of people cut their teeth as an accountant working as auditors. So you see everybody out on the audit trail. I never did that. Now, audit has its place because it exposes people to a lot of different types of businesses, and you're working through issues as part of those businesses. I kind of think that I had a similar training, if you will, but I was working in small businesses doing all the things. So I was doing accounts receivable, I was doing accounts payable, I was doing the bank recs, I was doing payroll, I was doing the stat accounts, I was doing the management accounts. So I had that exposure to all aspects of it. Whereas a lot of people, if they go into larger firms, will just do one thing. So I've had temp roles in between other roles where I've gone and worked in an AP role, and all you're doing from 9 till 5 was processing invoices. I think I've enjoyed working in businesses, particularly when I started out in smaller businesses where I had exposure to a lot more, because it then makes more sense. Everything kind of, the dots are connected.
Yeah. And so were you studying full-time and working full-time, but studying by correspondence?
I wasn't studying full-time. I took a little bit longer to complete my degree. So I did the first year full-time, but then after that I was probably a part-time student to various degrees. So sometimes I'd take a couple of units, sometimes I'd take a single one. It would depend on what was happening with life and work at the time.
Sure.
So it did take me a little bit longer. But if I'm looking at the track, so if I'm looking at people that I started off with in uni and they would have finished after 3 or 4 years, depending on what they were looking at doing, and they would have had 1 or 2 years work experience by the time I'd finished my degree. But I'd finished my degree, and by that stage I'd had kind of 4 or 5 years work experience. So I don't think it was a detrimental impact for me. I do kind of wonder now, working at a university now and seeing, last night I was at a college commencement dinner, seeing the on-campus life that students can have, I kind of wonder about what I missed out on.
Sure.
But I don't have any regrets, but I do kind of see that now, and I see bonds that have been formed by people who go to university together and they kind of stay through. And I still have that to a certain degree, but they're not people that I went to university with.
Sure. But you can't look at it like that, because you could be well ahead as a result of that time spent in the business, right? Pros and cons.
And I think for me, it goes to show that you don't always have to follow a set path.
Yeah, no, for sure. And then, so how long did you spend in that business manager role before you sort of taken on a couple of others?
So that was about 4 years in that role. And then the lady I worked for at that stage, so she was from the UK.
Okay.
And she sat me down one day and she said to me, right, Karma, I'm relocating back to the UK and I'm going to set up a conference venue. And it was a remote island off the coast of Scotland. I'd really like you to come and be my business manager over there.
Okay.
I was 23, 24 at that stage. And I said, no, that's too big a move for me. And it was also moving to a remote part. So I left that role and I joined a local real estate agency in their finance team and basically doubled their finance team, I guess. So I worked for a chartered accountant, and that's when I started my CA program. Working there. And again, it was a small business, so I was doing a lot of different things, and that was quite interesting because that was just before the introduction of GST. And working in property margin scheme, that became quite an interesting challenge in that role.
As in learning it or applying it, or what part was the challenge?
All of the above. So when GST came in, there was a lot of debate back then about what does it apply to and what does it not apply to. And for the most part, I think it was quite black and white. When it came to property, it wasn't always black and white, particularly the group that I was working for at the time. They had the managing director had a few side projects where he'd be buying blocks of land and relocating houses and then renovating the houses and renting them or selling them. Now, if you've got a relocated house, is that a new supply or is it a recycled supply? And so that's where there was many debates. I attended a number of property and GST seminars at that time, and I think I was even stumping the people who were delivering it. I mean, we managed our way through it, and I think even now there's probably a lot of case law and precedents from that time where it's a bit confusing, but it was I think it was quite daunting kind of coming in because I was still young and working in that environment where you were kind of making quite large decisions, but it was good to have the support of people around me who trusted my judgment, and we were also working with external specialist advisors as well. So I probably learned a lot there as well.
Yeah, I could imagine. And so when did the role with Colonial First State come up?
So that was the next stage.
Yeah, okay.
Next stage. So I started in kind of local real estate, and then I graduated.
Yeah.
And I moved up to national real estate, but with a shopping centre bent. So I joined Colonial First State, and I was based in their head office at Chadstone in Victoria. So not a bad place to be based on a day-to-day. And no, I did not get lost in the shopping centre. So that was where I moved up into a role that was looking after the management accounting for various shopping centres. So having to work with understanding the different leases and the lease types and making sure that we were charging rent correctly, but then also that we were managing the shopping centres in the right way. So I learned a lot about marketing and all of that kind of stuff. I also, while I was there, shifted over into the development team, so development finance, which is, again, like there's so many different facets of it, what you can do when you've got an accounting degree. So that was moving into the space where you were working with development managers on feasibility studies if you were building a new shopping centre or building an extension to a shopping centre, and how that would all stack up, because then all of a sudden you're looking at development costs and dealing with builders and construction margins and all of this kind of stuff and managing contingencies, but also integrating that with underlying assets.
Yep.
And ultimately working for an organisation that is a listed property trust. So you've got reporting requirements that you have to deliver on for shareholders, there's shareholder expectations. So that was a very big leap from kind of local real estate into something quite big, but we had a really good supportive team.
Yep.
And I think we all worked really well together. And it's one of those places that I look back on fondly, thinking it had a great culture and I learned a lot. And I think it was a really good place to be right at that point in my career.
Yeah. So what do you think was the biggest challenge, though, moving from a smaller business to such a large scale business so quickly?
I think for me, it's being aware of the boundaries of your role.
Okay.
And so when you're in a small business, as I said before, you're doing everything.
Yeah.
And then when you move up to a larger business where you've got, say, 300 people in a head office, all of a sudden you're not dealing with all of the things anymore. So I think for me, there's always been an importance on relationship building. And then when you're in a smaller organization, it's probably more relationships with your external suppliers or investors or when you're in a larger organization, it's the relationships across different teams. So making sure that you're working with the people in the leasing team or the development team, or even within a finance function, making sure that the management accountants are talking to the statutory accountants and that you're working together. So I think that was probably one of the biggest shifts that I had to make in that transition.
Yeah, right. And so at what point did the UAE call come through? When did that happen?
So I'd been at Colonial for maybe about 4 years, just under 4 years. Okay. And I was sitting at home. It was a Thursday night. I was living in St Kilda East in Victoria, and my phone rang, and it was a private number, which I don't normally answer, but for some reason I did. Yeah. And it was, "Hi, I'm calling from a recruiter in Dubai. Have you ever thought about working in the Middle East?" That's not what you're expecting when you answer a phone at 8:30 on a Thursday night.
Not a private number either.
No. So I kind of said, "It's not something I have thought about, but tell me more." So I didn't say yes, but I didn't say no. I kind of went, "Well, let's see where this goes."
Were you skeptical of whether it was a legitimate call?
I was to begin with on the call, because I kind of got off the call and I think my husband looked at me and said, "What's just going on?" I said, I just had a phone call from someone in the Middle East asking if I'd be interested in working over there. And he said, "Really?" I think things fell into place once, because they then sent me an email with some more information. And so we had a little bit of communication back and forth. And I think after that initial phone call, my husband and I started kind of going, "Whoa, well, what if this happens? And what if that happens?" And so we started kind of thinking about it. And there was some email exchanges back and forth. And then it kind of went quiet for a week. And I went, "Oh, nothing's happening. But then it kicked off again. So it was quite an interesting process. But after that happened in the May. Right. And then it would have been August or September.
So what year was this?
2008.
So this is pre-LinkedIn kicking off properly. Where did they get your details from?
It was the same recruitment company that had put me in a role in Australia. So they'd gone international. So I think at that stage a lot of them had moved to the Middle East.
So they weren't calling from Dubai. There was a
Yeah, they were.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, they were. It was somebody calling from Dubai.
Yeah, all right.
And she'd obviously had the database of
Yeah, right.
candidates and then
Yeah. Okay.
cross-referenced.
Fine.
Look, you'd know how it works more than
Sure.
I do.
Yeah.
So that's where it happened. And look, I'd never left Australia.
Okay.
I didn't even have a passport. So,
yeah, right.
but given that I'm a person who kind of likes to follow opportunities to see where they lead, I very quickly got a passport, and my first trip overseas was a job interview where I flew to the Middle East for 3 days.
Yeah, right. They paid, I assume.
They paid.
Okay,
they
good,
paid.
good,
So, so my first trip overseas was a job interview where I flew overseas business class, actually.
Oh, well done.
I know. Well, it's hard now.
Yeah.
Because I have to pay for my own flights now.
Yeah, outrageous. And because aren't visas quite difficult for UAE? Is that an easy process?
So when you're going for a short trip, you can go on a tourist visa, and Australians are, so we're one of the countries where you get an automatic tourist visa.
Okay.
Well, it may not be the case now. I haven't been there for a number of years, but we had a tourist visa which basically covered me for the 3 days that I was there. It's only when you go to move there that you have a lot more process that you need to go through in terms of sponsorship, because if you're a resident over there, your residency is tied to your job.
Okay.
So you've got a whole bunch of processes to go through in terms of visas.
Right. So was it an easy decision? I can't imagine it would have been.
It wasn't. We came back and we did a whole list of pros and cons.
Your husband go with you on the trip?
Not on the interview. No, I just went on the interview myself. So, yes, my first trip overseas was a job interview. My second trip was to move, and my husband's first trip overseas was to move.
Wow.
So he trusted me, which is good. I think we came back and we kind of looked at it. We looked at all the options. And we said, why wouldn't we? Like, if we get over there and it doesn't work out, we know what we can come back to.
Yeah.
And if it does work out, then who knows where it may lead. So I think we're both we'll take calculated risks. And so I think for us, we kind of went, why not? We talked about going overseas. We'd never been overseas. Yeah. Now's an opportunity. And they will relocate us overseas. Let's do it.
Yeah. Okay.
So we did. So I landed in the Middle East to work for a property development company in January 2009. Now, do you remember 2009?
I do remember it, but I wasn't working full time then. I was first year
global financial crisis.
Yeah.
Is 2009, and I've just landed in the Middle East working for a property development company. So that was quite interesting.
So were you scared for your role then, having just moved?
Look, I went over there, and the first couple of weeks it was very quiet because I think they didn't quite know what to do with me.
Yeah.
And it was only a couple of years later that I found out that there was it could have gone either way with me being sent back in those early 2 weeks, but obviously I did something to prove my worth and my value. So it never really became an issue. And I think if it had, they would have relocated because they would have had to fly us back home again.
Right.
So
well, that's nice.
I don't think that was a major concern at the time.
Okay. Yeah, right. And so what was the UAE like at that time? Where were you? Abu Dhabi, Dubai?
Abu Dhabi. Okay. So at that point in time, it was kind of on the cusp of starting a whole bunch of different developments. So back then they had the previous iteration of taxis that they had there, which were these golden cream taxis that may or may not have had seatbelts in the back seat and kind of drove around the city. And it wasn't long after I started there that they had more formalized taxi services that became kind of the silver Camrys, and there was a lot of development coming on. So I think I was there right as things were starting to change and progress with a lot of different projects. There was a lot of roadworks, a lot of development.
Sure.
There was also there's a lot of different nationalities living in
Yeah.
that part of the world. So it's really interesting. I think the learning curve there was just dealing with so many different cultures. I was
Yeah.
the only native English speaker in the first finance team that I landed in.
How many people?
Maybe 20.
Wow. Okay. Right.
And
So
so,
they spoke English, but just weren't native speakers.
yeah,
Or they
spoke
didn't
English,
speak
but
it at
not,
all.
no, spoke English, but they weren't native.
Quick one before we get back to it. If you're listening to this podcast, you probably already know that I recruit for senior finance professionals for high growth businesses. That's what I do outside of this show. My approach is built around storytelling. When I take on a search, I build a narrative around the business, who they are, what they're building, where they're going, and why that role matters. Before I reach out to a single candidate, I tell that story across multiple channels to my network of over 28,000 finance professionals in Australia, so that when I do start conversations, candidates already know who you are and there's a level of buy-in before I even contact them. So if you're a founder, CEO, or CFO that's thinking about a finance hire, even if it's early days, I'm always happy to chat. Whether that's a question, some free advice, or a sense check on what the market looks like. You can find me on LinkedIn or at storyrecruitment.com.au. All right, let's get back into it.
So we often would sit around, and I think one of the easiest ways to understand the different nationalities is most of us at that stage were of an age where we were married. And so you'd kind of talk to everybody and say, so what was your wedding like? And I said, well, we had 55 people at a winery in Victoria. And then a guy that was working for me is like, well, I had 5,000 people at my village at my wedding. So it was quite interesting.
Imagine the fancy cards.
I know. I know.
So how do you navigate that then? Was the English still of a good standard?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
The English was of a good standard.
Yeah.
This was a local firm, so they probably would operate in dual language. I think the interesting thing is just being aware of the cultural differences and how you interact with people. So I'm living in the Middle East. I'm not going to walk up to every male colleague I see and hold out my hand for a handshake.
Sure. Yeah.
So you've got to meet people where they're at. So I keep saying my time over there, I probably didn't learn a great deal technically, but I learned a lot about resilience and dealing with different people in different situations and how they respond.
Yeah, right. Okay. And then how long were you in the UAE for?
8 years with 3 different jobs.
Yeah, okay, right. So decent stint. Was it did you enjoy your time there?
I did. We kind of went over there with the intent to pay off the mortgage back here.
Sure.
You kind of go over there and go tax-free, all the rest of it. That did not happen. But my claim to fame is I filled a passport before the expiry date. So being based in the Middle East, obviously not right at this point in time, but back then, it was really great to be in such a central hub for travel. So in Australia, if you're going to Cyprus, for example, you would plan a big trip. We went to Cyprus for a long weekend, and that was one of our first trips out of the UAE. So we did a lot of travel. We probably came back to Australia every couple of years because it's quite a big flight back here. Yeah. So we made the most of it over there. 9 to 5 tends to be 9 to 5 wherever you are in the world. So it's how do you make the most of it outside of that? And I think for us, it was experiences. It was, I was lucky enough to also work with different regions over there. So so my second role over there, I was working on a beach. So you can be an accountant and work on a beach.
So hold on, your office was on a beach, as in you were on the beach, or you were building a beach or something?
No, both.
Okay.
I worked in a site shed that was on the sand, maybe 20 feet from the water.
As in there was a floor, there wasn't sand floor? No,
there was a floor. So I'd step up into a...
Yeah, okay, all right.
And we had air conditioning and a kitchen and a bathroom, and it was an office.
Yeah, right.
But it was on the beach. So that role, I was a commercial manager for a facilities management company. So we were managing beaches. And managing the shops and managing
Yeah.
lifeguards and security. We also built, we managed a ladies only beach.
All
And
right.
so
Yeah.
we had to build a wall,
Right.
not just on the sand, but also out into the water. So a floating wall on the
Okay.
water
Right.
so that it was a secluded ladies
They could
beach.
swim under it if they wanted, I guess.
Yeah, possibly.
Yeah.
So that was really interesting. Again,
Yeah.
as an accountant, all of a sudden, sometimes you're having to deal with runaway camels on a beach that has come from a sheikh's palace that's next door, or you're working on the beach. Now the Red Bull Air Race was also something that was held in Abu Dhabi. So you'd be sitting at work and they'd be setting up for the air race. So it was kind of fascinating. It was almost like being part of an events company because there was always something going on.
How'd you get any work done? This sounds like fun.
Well, yeah, you still got deadlines, so you need to make sure that you do things in between. Right. And then I think after a couple of years, I'd had enough fun on the beach, and I joined an education company over there, and that was my first foray into education after many years of property and facilities.
Yeah, sure. So what was it about education that drew you to it at the time?
Look, I think it just sounded interesting because it was a regional role. So it was also looking after Oman and India and also North Africa. Right. So for me, what attracted me to the role was the commerciality and the region. I think it was only once I landed in that role that I went, oh, I can use my powers for good. So not that I'm saying the rest is evil, but it's lovely to be able to work for an organization that has a purpose that is not just shareholder distribution. There was an office in Kenya, in Nairobi, and one of the contracts over there, which while I was not on the ground delivering, I'm managing the finances for it, was a UK government funded contract to provide solar lamps and things to young girls living in rural areas so they could study.
Yeah, cool.
And give them an education so that they could progress their lives. And that just made me feel good because I kind of went, I don't need to be out there doing that stuff. I can still do the work that I enjoy doing, but just do it for an organization that's doing good things for people. And so that for me made a real difference to how I perceived my work.
Yeah.
And I didn't notice it until after I joined.
Yeah, cool. And so did you go out to Kenya at all?
I did. The last year that I was in the Middle East, I basically spent 1 week every month in Nairobi.
Awesome.
And when I left, when I resigned to say I was going back to Australia, the hotel that I stayed in, which was a new hotel, I got a bigger send-off from the staff of the hotel in Nairobi than I did from the company that I worked for. Because they saw me, like I was living there a week every month and it was the same stuff. So they became my family. So I think they were a bit sad to hear that I was moving back to Australia and wasn't coming back.
Yeah, fair. On that, what prompted the move back home?
A lot of people move to the Middle East and they say, I will just do 1 or 2 years. And the amount of people I met over there who said, we're just doing 1 or 2 years, and that was 28 years ago. We used to have this saying that it was kind of 2, 5 or life. Now, after the 6 years, every time we came back to Australia, we'd check in with each other. So my husband and I would look at each other on the plane on the way back to the Middle East and say, is it time yet? And we'd say, no, not yet. And then in 2016, we came back for a family wedding in Melbourne, and it was one of those March weeks in Melbourne where the sun was shining and everything was just wonderful. And and then after that trip, we hopped on the plane and we looked at each other and we said, we think it's time. We also, at that point, because it goes through stages over there where people are brought in or people are let go, and we wanted to be in control of our own destiny. So we didn't want to don't come Monday, let us. So we wanted to make sure that we controlled our exit out of the country, particularly because we had 2 cats and 2 dogs.
Sure, yeah. That's hard.
I guess that it was then that we decided to start planning about coming back
Okay.
to Australia. And it took us a few months, but
Yeah.
I think that's because we thought it through quite methodically.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, how did you find finding a role back in Oz? Because Australians don't look at international experience the way they should. So, was it
No.
challenging?
Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
So to begin with, I was thinking, I'm a horse rider and I'd gotten back into horse riding in the Middle
Yeah.
East. And I said, right, life's too short to not do the things that you love.
Yeah.
And I couldn't see a way of moving back to Melbourne and working in Melbourne and easily having the lifestyle that I
Sure.
wanted to live. So I started looking at little big cities or big little cities. So we were looking at Hobart, Perth, Canberra, Brisbane.
Okay.
And so once I'd narrowed down the cities, I started contacting recruiters
Yeah.
in
Okay.
those cities.
Cool.
Hobart back then probably didn't have much going on.
Right.
Perth, we discounted because all of our family's east coast of Australia, and so at least we'd be on the same time zone. So I contacted recruiters in Brisbane and I contacted recruiters in Canberra.
Right.
The guys in Brisbane basically said, don't want to talk to you until you're on the ground.
Okay. Right.
So that I found challenging.
Yeah.
I was lucky that I happened upon a single recruiter in Canberra who kind of could see something of value in what I had to offer. And so we just started conversations and we'd check in with each other every couple of months and see what was going on. And I have to say that's part of the reason I ended up in Canberra when I came back was because of a recruiter.
Who was the recruiter? Let's give him a shout out.
It was Keith Cantley. Now I don't know if he's still doing recruitment, but he's the reason I ended up in
like
Canberra.
A good one.
Yeah.
Nice one. Cool. All right. Well, and then so did it take the process of moving back home? Was it pretty straightforward, pretty quick? Do you have any issues getting the cats and dogs in?
No, it was very expensive to get the cats and dogs in, but no issues. And I think we did use an international moving company.
Right.
So, and we also used a company to support us with the pets.
Yep.
In saying that, we moved to Canberra with no house and no jobs. So I had a relationship with a recruiter. We did not have a house.
Okay.
So I think we booked this would have been in the early days of Airbnb. We booked an Airbnb for a week. And as soon as we hit the ground, we basically started applying for rental properties. And we secured one. We also, when the animals arrived back, because we didn't have the rental property just yet, I think they flew back here and then spent a week in boarding.
Right.
I was also lucky that I was doing a bit of remote consultancy work for my previous organisation just over the short term. So I had a little bit of flexibility there. But then once I was on the ground, I met with Keith for a coffee and away we went.
Yeah, perfect. And so the role with the University of Canberra, what was that like? Because did you join as CFO at the time? No. Okay.
No. So I joined in mid 2017, and I joined as a director of finance and business services.
Yeah. Right.
So I was reporting to a COO and CFO. So the interesting thing.
COO?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
COO, Chief Operating Officer.
Yeah.
Sorry, I forget the
Okay.
acronyms.
That's fine.
And she'd stepped up out of the Director of Finance role. So she was Director of Finance and CFO, but took the CFO title with her into the Chief Operating Officer role. So that was probably a big shift because I'd gone from dealing with smaller teams to all of a sudden leading a team of kind of up to 50.
Yeah, right.
So it was a doubling in size of the team that I was managing. And also being new to the sector.
Yeah.
I hadn't worked in the university sector before, so that was quite interesting. But the people I had reporting to me had been there for a while, so I had really good deputies. And so it was and I also had the person who'd been in the role as a mentor and somebody who was able to support me. So I did the Director of Finance and Business Services role for about 4 to 5 years.
Okay, so a good stint
there.
there.
Yeah, and then our CFO and coup was leaving the business, and so you're not always going to find a chief operating officer with finance experience. So that my first foray into CFO was really a title change,
Okay, sure, sure.
which is interesting because it's probably a bit different to how others have experienced it. So
Yeah,
I don't think my work changed, Tom.
right.
The work didn't change, but the accountability and the responsibility changed. So
Yeah, right.
whereas in the past I'd still be preparing the stat accounts and still be preparing the budgets and presenting them,
Yeah,
I still had somebody else who was the final tick the box. Whereas
yeah,
when I
right.
moved to the CFO role, I didn't have that. It's all I kind of feel like maybe I had training wheels. Maybe I was a CFO with
Yeah,
training wheels
oh,
for the
maybe.
first few years, and
Yeah,
then moving into the CFO role, the training wheels come off, and I've got the full responsibility. So
yeah,
it was a little bit different.
yeah. Okay. Well, was there anything specific about the university space, particularly for finance, that surprised you, or is there anything that come up, or that the experience that you didn't anticipate?
I think I always knew, I keep explaining it as like five businesses in one because
Right.
universities, people think you're going into a university and like I had a property background, but how many universities have got significant land assets that they're
Yeah.
having to manage, student accommodation, all the rest of it? So I think for me, the first surprising bit was how much transferable knowledge I already had that could move into that role.
Yep.
The thing that is unique about the sector, though, is if you look at normal corporates, you kind of go CEO and then CFO is kind of the next person there.
Sure.
It's a
Yep.
little bit different in the university space because
Right.
you've got the academic governance as well. So
Fine.
quite often as a CFO, you may not necessarily have as strong a voice as you may have in a corporate
Okay. Right.
organization. And you've also got people who understand finances maybe a little bit less than in a
Sure.
corporate environment. So
Yeah.
a lot of it is about engagement and translation.
Yeah. Okay. Is that challenging?
It is, but I love it.
Yeah. Okay.
And I think I love it because I call myself a financial storyteller. So part of
Yeah.
it is how do we translate financial concepts so that other
Mm.
people can understand it. So I'm always trying to think about how we can present something.
Yep.
I try to think of an income statement like chapter headings of a story rather than
Yeah. Yeah.
what's going on. So and that helps translate the message to the various parts of the business. You also do need to engage and understand and listen to people in various parts of the business though, because I think it goes both ways. They're not just going to listen to you if they don't think you understand what they do.
Yeah. But is it hard to get certain stuff across the line that you might have in another circumstance?
Possibly. I think for me it takes more preparation and engagement.
Yeah.
So I think you can still get the same result, but there might be a little bit more legwork involved in getting to that spot only because people don't necessarily understand all the steps or what you're trying to achieve.
Yeah. Okay. Right. So the role come up with University of New England. Was the second CFO role any easier, or was there anything that was particularly challenged that you did it in a different way the second time? Or what did you learn doing it the second time?
So the second time for me, the nuance was a little bit different. It was almost the next progression again, because when I was at UC, I was still reporting to a chief
Yep.
operating officer. So moving up to the University of New England, I now report directly to the vice chancellor and
Okay.
CEO.
Yep.
So it's been another elevation again of my responsibility. And we're lucky here. We've got a new exec team. Well, we've had a relatively new exec team. So
Sure.
we've all just kind of landed in this place together at the right
Yeah.
time.
Okay.
And it's
Yeah.
quite an exciting time. We've just launched a new strategy this year. We've got delivery of the new strategy. We're trying to think a little bit differently about how we can go about doing things. And so for me, coming up here, I almost kind of split the CFO role into an A and a B stream. So A
Okay.
is the business as usual. How do you do the things that you need to keep doing? But how do we stretch ourselves into this CFO B so it becomes almost like a a strategic CFO role.
Yeah.
So you're less concerned about the debits and the credits, and you're more concerned about what
Yeah.
could we do. So it's getting more involved in strategy and direction, which is quite exciting. It's just the challenge is finding the time to
Yeah.
shift from
Yeah.
one to the other.
Yeah. So if people are wanting to get into the university space for finance, what do you think are the big things they need to prepare themselves for or be expecting of?
Um, Change, but I think that's everywhere. I think that the interesting thing, and it's not just university finance at the moment, but I think the nature of accounting is maybe changing a little bit.
Yeah. Okay.
So I might take as a broader question. I
Yeah.
think
Yeah.
it's
Sure.
what are we looking for when people enter a finance career now or an accounting career? You don't just want to go to university to do like you can't just go in and learn. Well, I don't even know if we do T accounts
Sure. Sure.
in study anymore, but I think more and more it's going to be how do we communicate numbers and how do we add insight into the data that we're analyzing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think gone are the days where you're going to have a back office accountant who sits in front of an Excel sheet and doesn't talk to anybody for hours on end.
Sure.
I mean, that might happen every now and then, but
Sure.
I think that we're moving into the term finance business partner came out a number of years ago, but I think it probably applies. There'll be people who will come up with some new fancy title. But I think it's how do we work with the business more?
Yeah,
and so you need to understand the numbers, but it's going to be critical to really understand the business to see how you can add value. Because if we look at automation and AI and all the rest of it, it can make those routine parts of our roles so much faster that gives us the capacity and the capability to do.
Yep.
I call it exciting stuff. But I think that's kind of where we're heading is how do we balance the innovation and the governance?
Yeah. Yeah. It's hard to get right.
Mm.
And so where do you see things going for the uni over the next few years, or what sort of projects are you working on? What sort of things are you working on as part of your role?
So we've just got the new strategy, so we're working on that at the moment. So what does a transition under that strategy look like? And it's quite exciting. We've got a lot of work happening here with AI. We've got LabNext 70, which is generating a whole bunch of work in relation to how we can use AI. I think we were one of the first universities that provided access to staff and students. Yep. So we've all got our internal access to our own Magic, where we can use things to support us in our day-to-day. So I think there's a lot of excitement there. We're also working on how we can better support students, not just while they're at university, but where they're living and working in communities. What can we do out there in communities to help students really thrive, but also how can we benefit our local communities? So I'm living in Armidale, which is 5-6 hours drive from Sydney, and you notice the distance. Yeah. So right now, for example, I think somebody was just telling me that maybe we were on the news last night because we had one of the highest fuel prices at one of our petrol stations last night. But we need to rely on ourselves and our communities. And so the integration between the university and the community is perhaps much greater than you would experience in a larger city. Right. And so I'm quite excited about what we can do in that realm. I'm off tomorrow to I think I'm handing out some medals at the inaugural Armidale Running Festival, and so that's just one of the links between the university and the community is how do we get involved. So again, you can be a CFO and hand out novelty checks and medals and all sorts of things. How far is the race? Well, there's a selection of them. There's 3Ks, there's 10Ks, there's a half marathon. So it's a running festival. It's catering to all abilities. Yeah, well, best of luck to all participants. Yeah, absolutely. I won't be running.
Okay, fun.
If I could do it on my horse, different story.
Yeah, that's as good time as any to finish up though. But you've been fantastic, Karma. I've really enjoyed your approach to financial storytelling, development, how finance sits within the unis. I think it's been really interesting. I think a lot of the listeners would agree. So if anyone has any questions or they want to reach out and just get your advice on anything, is that something you're open to?
Yeah, absolutely. And with a name like Karma and a surname of Auden, I cannot hide. So if you put my details into LinkedIn, it'll be the number one result.
I'll put the links where we go out as well. But thanks again for coming on the show.
Awesome. Thanks, Tom.
Thanks for listening to the CFO Track. If you enjoyed the show, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share with a friend. I'll see you next time.